Hi there, welcome to Black Gumbo Southern Gardening. Hey, have you ever wanted to see an entire gardening year condensed into a single video? Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look back at this year. We're going to start in January and show the entire garden all the way through to December, the end of the year. And we're going to show you 3 overlapping seasons. Let's go. We begin the year. This is January the 2nd, and we're loading up this raised bed in a hugelkultur fashion. We're going to grow onions. So our very first project of the year was to top off this bed and grow onions. Now the fall-winter garden from 2021 is still growing over there in my main beds, and we'll take a look at that. It's a mature garden, and it's one of the joys of living here in Zone 9A on the Texas coast is look what we can grow year-round. Here's my son about to pull out a radish. This is a daikon radish, and we grew a lot of those. That's huge. He can hardly get it out. So this was sown in October of 2021 and sown as seed. And yeah, look at that. Absolutely amazing. We grew all kinds of brassicas, some Asian greens there. Those things really attracted the snails, but the snails kind of stayed there. I let the trap crops stick around. I wanted to grow some peppers, so here we are. Showed you how to start seeds, and these peppers did really well. You'll see how well these peppers did. Here's my single seed challenge, the first effort, which failed. This is a fish pepper I got from Auxheart Gardening. Rachel over there sent me some fish pepper seeds. I don't even know what a fish pepper is, and now I still don't because this one did not come up. We had to start over, and my second single seed challenge did not grow either. It failed. But here is why I love fall and winter gardening. These cabbages headed up really nicely. Had a little cabbage worm damage, but you just peel off those leaves until you get a clean head, and man, I love cabbage. We did great. Look at these beautiful cabbages. I did use weed cloth that year. We've been fighting the weeds, but yeah, there's a broccoli plant. I already harvested a big old broccoli out of there. It gave me a second crop of small florets all around the base. This was the year that my dog Phoebe blew out her ACL and needed surgery, an expensive surgery. And I'm so grateful to all of you. You guys actually paid for her surgery, and we're still so grateful. But that was in February. Here we are growing celery. I've never grown celery before, but had a blast doing it. It was so awesome. Showed you how to blanch the celery by binding it up like this. And yeah, we had a good harvest. This did take a little while, well into the spring, but it was very delicious. My tomatoes, grew a lot of tomatoes. I grew 6 varieties of tomatoes this year, and we multi-sowed into those cells where they're all together there. Showed you how to separate those. I did a lot more cooking videos this year. Here's a video showing you how to use a daikon radish in several recipes throughout the year. We did a lot of recipes, and well, I enjoy the cooking videos. Had to try some squash. It's still early in late winter here, and we're going to start some squash seeds. Hopefully we can try to get them matured before the vine borers show up. We have vine borer damage. Well, I'll give you a hint. We didn't beat the vine borers this year, but we tried. Showed you how to start seeds. It's always fun. I like starting seeds. It's kind of therapeutic. Here's the pepper seeds, the little seedlings, and we took their plugs, and yeah, they were really healthy. The peppers did so well this year, and I showed you how to pot those up in these little cups so that we could let them spread their legs out. Man, you'll see these peppers later on in the year. They were champs. Some of the harvest from the fall-winter garden went to making a nice stew. And here are some of my cherry tomatoes that I grew last year, the year before, that I used. They were frozen. Those are my favorite tomato. Most everything in this stew I grew in my garden. That's always encouraging. I'm really into apple trees, and I showed you these are 1-year-old apple tree whips. That's what you call them. They go straight up, and you got to come in and notch them to try to force out a bud to grow where you want it to grow. And I showed you this process, and This takes time. You know, we're now into a whole nother year beyond this point, and these apple trees are doing just fine. You'll see later in the video that we got branches right where we wanted branches. So I also have some stone fruit. Here's a plum. We're going to prune this plum up. And we're focusing here on backyard orchard culture. We want to keep our trees small. So I show you how to shape them and how to prune them. And you know, what's another project? It's time to plant another bare root apple tree. I needed a pollinator. So we bought this bare root Anna to pollinate our golden Dorset, because the first Anna I had did not make it. It was the only tree that I lost. And well, we planted bare root trees and did a pretty good job growing some trees. These trees really make me happy. Looking forward to apples. We moved over to our peach tree, put in a new peach tree, and this thing was about 4 feet tall, but we chopped it down and selected 4 branches, showed you how to prune it, and you'll see in the end of this video, or later in it, how this peach tree took off. Did great. We are now taking out the portions of the fall garden in earnest and preparing for our spring garden. Here I am knocking back some weeds. That's the last remaining crop that my son came over to help me harvest in this first bed. We had a lot of carrots that year. It's my favorite thing, one of my favorite things to grow as in terms of root crops. You can see the holes from the daikon radishes. They really punch deep. So here we're amending with some green sand, help break up clay. And yeah, it's time to get that garden ready. Sifting through with a rake, kind of getting the weeds out and fluffing up the soil. We're going to amend this. I do this every spring. I use my own compost. And I also brought in some compost. This was from Ken at Orchid Supply Store. That was good stuff. But we put a layer of compost on the whole garden, and that is the majority of the amendments we give to our garden each year. We do spot treat when we plant. We put slow release organic fertilizer in the holes of some of the things we plant, but for the most part, the organic compost that we use is what fertilizes our garden. Here's our tomatoes. They got real leggy, but who cares? Leggy tomatoes, you just plant them deep or on their side, and they do good for you. I love tomatoes. We had a good tomato year, even though it didn't really go as planned in terms of training and trimming and pruning them. We still got a bumper crop, man. We got tons of tomatoes. So spring garden going in earnest now, and here are the peppers. I grew kinds of peppers I wanted to grow this year, and you'll see they did awesome. We also learned about mulching and how to use cardboard in the garden, and that did in fact help keep the weeds down all year. And with the leftover plants, well, we tried to find places for them. I wanted to pot some. That's a cayenne pepper plant, and plugged some in, multi-planting here, plugged some in with some herbs there. Yeah, there's nothing like spreading things around and plugging things in. It's a way to extend your garden. Now, I was on a quest to find the best green bean ever, and you guys told me try the rattlesnake pole bean, and so we did. Planted some from seeds from Generations and trellised them up here, and you'll see that they tasted good. So again, this is our spring garden, and we are gradually taking out the fall plants and putting in our spring garden. These are my Edox hybrid cherry tomatoes from Johnny Seed. My favorite tomato of all time. I highly recommend it. I wanted to train them up a single string like I did in previous years, because you get a nice harvest that way. But you'll see, even though I didn't train them, they did great. My muscadine's got a heavy corrective pruning this year. We had to correct some mistakes I made in the past. And yeah, you have to do this every year with your muscadine grapes. This is Micro Vineyard, is still kind of dormant here. So this may be actually earlier in the spring. This is Phoebe's first day outside after surgery. And there's an update on those onions. Onion crop did well. Blackberries, man. That one blackberry bush went crazy and gave me a ton of berries this year. These are the strings that the tomatoes, those guys down there, were supposed to grow up, but life happened and it was a tough year in terms of personal things, and so they just got to sprawl. There's our squash we started, and we hoped that these would produce before the vine borers showed up in mid-spring, but they didn't. Look at all those blossoms. This is a bell pepper, and if you get that many bell peppers on a plant, that's a good plant. Once again, Phoebe's first few days outside in the garden without a leash on and without her cone. She is healed up now and just has to grow back that back right quarter panel. If you follow my channel, you know about the saga of Samson, the daikon radish. Samson grew in a block, and we thought, well, let's see if Samson can break that block, see if he can crack it. He never did. The garlic did not do so well. I think I pulled it a little early, but we got some garlic, some green garlic, but didn't do so well with the heat. The dill did fantastic. This is the dill that's left after I harvested about half of that plant. And you got that nice bouquet of flowers there. It was wonderful. Over on the other side of the garden, I have an herb bed, and these are bunching onions from last year, and they put out a lot of seed. We saved that seed and did quite well with it. This was thyme, and it's just overflowing the garden bed. I had all kinds of herbs in here. I was actually weed whacking that stuff back. Gotta love herbs. All this rosemary, it's just so aromatic. You can see here that the grapevines have broken bud and are putting on growth right where we want it, right where we pruned. And they do leave a mess when you prune them. Stuff like that. Makes great mulch though. We sowed our beets, and the neighbor's cat decided to come and scratch out a big hole in the middle of them, but we got a good harvest of beets anyway. And here's how things are growing. Over there I've got some cucumbers planted, and I've got that grate to keep the cat out. We did work heavily on our weeding this year. We've got this scuffle hoe and came through and made sure that we were weed free. Here's Rachel. Rachel came and visited, and we had a collab between our channels. Go check out Auxheart Gardening. We had a talk about advice for new gardeners because Rachel was relatively new at gardening and had learned a whole lot. I had the beans growing. I figured I better get them something to grow on since they're pole beans, so we put in a net trellis, and it did quite well. Easy to do. Here are some slips coming up from our sweet potato. Showed you how to use these seed potatoes to grow sweet potato slips, and you'll see just how crazy, that right-hand bucket there, you'll see how crazy that one was full of good sweet potato slips. Here are the beans climbing up the net, and man, they find that net. You don't even have to train them up there. You don't have to clip them or anything. They just find it. Well, it was getting about the time where the onions were showing us that they were almost ready to harvest. When the tops flop over, they're ready to pull up. Some of them were flopped over and papery, while others were still upright and had some moisture in them. But it was getting to be time, so I showed you how to harvest onions. And we made this little drying rack out of scrap wood. We had a home renovation this year that took a lot of time away from the garden. But we made this curing rack, and that's one way to do it. And those were some great onions. Man, we had good onions. Well, we're beginning to get into late spring, and you can see that my sprawling tomatoes, these cherry tomatoes, are beginning to get, well, they're putting on tons of fruit, but you can see the weeds. You won't believe how weedy this bed gets, yet the tomatoes still produced. This was, again, my favorite tomato, and that's our second harvest, I think. You can see in the background the squash plants that didn't make it. The vine borers nailed them, but we did get tons of wonderful peppers this year. That is a mountain roaster sweet pepper. It was delicious. Absolutely wonderful. This is the first harvest of ripe cayenne peppers. Tons of cayenne, man. I've got cayenne powder for years. And I love this little red flame cayenne. Wonderful pepper. Remember those blossoms we looked at? Well, here's that plant. And here are the bell peppers that are growing there. I believe there are 6 of them on there. So 6 of those flowers got pollinated. I think I probably thinned a couple of them off of there, but yeah, they were good. Began to harvest beets as well. The spring garden is really showing its bounty. Here's those rattlesnake pole beans. These gave us a good harvest pretty much all through the spring and summer until the drought finally got it. But we went and picked a bunch of these and kept it picked so it would keep producing. Check out the trees. You can see that peach tree back there in the background, that one we pruned. The trees are doing great. This is a little micro orchard that makes me happy. All right, well, the drought is here. We had to water every single day, and I just put a sprinkler out there so I wouldn't have to stand out there in the heat. But the garden kept producing. Here's one of our harvests. A bunch of pole beans, some sweet peppers, some hot peppers, a bunch of beets, and we got ourselves a third harvest, or maybe a fourth harvest of these tomatoes. Basically, you could go out and just pick a bucket full anytime you wanted. They were always loaded with tomatoes. And then more cooking videos. We showed you how to use those onions and make some Mexican pickled onions, a condiment that you cannot be without if you like Mexican food. It's absolutely delicious. Cooking videos are not the most popular on my channel, but there is a core of you who love the cooking videos, and so I have you guys in mind. Here we're going to try these rattlesnake pole beans and see if they are the best bean. Blanched them and then stir-fried with some of our onions, a little soy sauce, and as it turns out, they're very, very good. They're very flavorful. However, they do have a string. It's not a tough string, but it is a string, and that's annoying. If you know of a green bean that doesn't have a string that tastes good, leave me a comment. Let me know. Here we are again picking some of those cherry tomatoes, and you can see that the bed is getting more and more weedy, but we just keep coming back. Where the squash failed down at the end of that weedy tomato bed, we went in and thought, well, summer's here, let's put some summer crops in, and lima beans do well. So we cleared out some weeds and fluffed up the soil. I grow Christmas lima beans, that's the variety. I get them at Seed Savers Exchange, and they do quite well for me. They cover a net trellis, and they're really dense when they grow, and they put on a good heavy crop, and they're delicious. So we planted some of these back here, and we also planted some okra seeds in our raised bed where the onions were, because it's summer, and that's what you do in summertime. We also decided to go and harvest a bunch of our tomatoes that the plants were looking really stressed, and we made this wonderful, this is the best thing I made all year. It is a pasta dish with cherry tomatoes, and man, you talk about good eating. This is something else. Like I said, best thing I made all year. I love making use of the fruit of the garden. But back outside, speaking of tomatoes, we went and harvested from our tomatoes. It's almost time to pull these plants out. They're getting stressed out, but we wanted to do a side-by-side taste test of all the varieties we grew this year. I don't even remember the variety names, so you just have to go back and watch those videos if you want to know what they are. But we cut them open, looked at them, and tasted them, and I determined that one on the bottom right, that cherry tomato, was the best one. Also, we did the same thing with our peppers, both sweet peppers and hot peppers. We did a side-by-side taste test. And, you know, that's not necessarily the best thing to do with hot peppers if you're kind of a wimp with heat. But I survived. These sweet peppers, man, they were prolific. Here's a Korean pepper that we grew, and this is supposed to be pretty spicy. And side-by-side testing, yeah, we took a jalapeno for kind of our baseline. Yeah, good stuff. My blackberry bush produced enough blackberries for me to make blackberry jelly. Showed you how to do that, and there's nothing like being able to preserve the bounty of your garden in such a way that brings morning joy just like that. Look how weedy this garden is. This garden bed is so weedy, but there's still tomatoes down there, tons of them. This is another one of our late summer harvests, but alas, it's time to clean out the main tomato beds in garden bed 1 and prep for growing other things. So cleaned it out, but we took all those tomatoes in and made a nice tomato soup, a roasted tomato soup. Showed you how easy that is. This particular method I learned from my son-in-law, and it turned out really nice. Summertime stresses out plants, and when plants are stressed out, they attract pests. And we had this grapevine skeletonizer moth come, and there she is there, come and devastate some of our grapevines. Well, she didn't devastate, but could have. So I showed you how to treat with BT, an organic bacterial-based insecticide, and we managed to save our grapevines the second year in a row from these pests. They can really put a whipping on your grapes. And in the height of summer, in the summer garden, the weeds find their way into everything. And there's that weedy bed. Look at that. So weed bound, but look at all the tomatoes. You could just go and hunt for them. It's like an Easter egg hunt. You can see down in there how prolific they are. This is how tomatoes grow naturally. They want to sprawl. They produce well, even if you don't trellis them. Certain varieties will produce well for you no matter what. The peppers just laughed at the heat. They did well. Peppers don't mind the heat, but here's those lima beans we planted. They came up, but then the weeds choked them out. We had just a weedy garden, but down there I wasn't able to stay on top of it. But even through the summer, we kept harvesting these cayennes and all the peppers. It was fantastic. Came back outside a few days after we sprayed the grapevines to show you that they were all dead, and you could find dead ones underneath the leaves there. And yeah, we saved. We had a lot of pestilence this year, though. We had a ton of pests come and visit the garden, tons of weeds. It was really a challenging year in terms of heat. You can see what the heat does. This is my cucumber patch, and the cucumbers down there. I didn't get a chance to trellis them either because, again, life. And so the garden's looking pretty bad right now. And I showed you that this is the truth of gardening. Sometimes your garden looks bad. This is the drought killing everything off, the heat, those rattlesnake pole beans dying off there. That's okay, that's gardening, and this is summer gardening. We're still getting a harvest out of that big weedy bed back there. Let's look at something more pretty though. This is my sanguinelli orange, blood orange, and it's putting on some fruit for me this year. Currently they're in the house right now, and the fruits are ripening up. My Kishu mandarin decided to take the year off, but it's still a lovely plant, really healthy. All the figs, they bore this year, and yeah, all the plants back here on the fruit deck doing great. I did lose that lime tree right there to the drought. All right, here are the stone fruits. There's that peach tree that we pruned at the beginning of the video that was so drastically reduced, but you can see these stone fruits, they grow up quite nicely and have that nice goblet shape. They're really responding well to the care we've given them. And yeah, these trees make me happy. Well, it's still summer. We have time to get in some sweet potatoes. I was a little late with them, but here's the result of our sweet potato slip making process. This is a little over, you ideally want to get them before that, before they get so dense, but you can see, you just separate them out, and you take your little plant, and you stick it in a hole, and they grow. And they grow sweet potatoes for you, so that's what we did. This soil back here was so loose, they thrived, they loved it. We also started some Mexican sunflower to act as organic fertilizer. Showed you how to grow these, and they're doing fine. Here's those sweet potatoes moving into this must be September. They are pouring over. We didn't get a good harvest though, and in the video I showed you why, but we did get some. Now it's time to begin the fall garden in earnest though. We're clearing our beds, and I did a little tilling. I had some weed problems. We needed to chop up the weeds, the weed root networks down there, the kinds of weeds we had, and rake them out. So this actually did pretty well for us and helped us to get ahead of the nutsedge a bit. We took in some rescue apple trees, and we're trying to revive these guys, and we'll show you the progress on that. And those apple trees that we started and notched, they grew exactly where we wanted them to grow, and I showed you how to take those limbs then and train them to make them grow in the shape that we want them to grow so that they'll bear more fruit. So now we're heading into fall. I decided I'm going to grow some leeks, and we plugged in these leeks and they started to do well. We started growing more brassicas. Again, this is the fall garden. Summertime is over, and it's time to get our cabbages and cauliflowers and kale and broccoli. We grew all of that. And so showed you how to plant all these things. These are seeds we started ourselves, and yeah, it was looking so good. The fall garden is my most favorite time to garden. we grew some bunching onions, grew some leeks, and plugged them in our little bed over here where I'd previously had garlic. All the seeds we sowed started to come up and everything was looking good. And it's in the fall that your citrus begins to ripen up. And so here's those sanguinelli blood oranges beginning to ripen. It was also time to harvest our sweet potatoes, and we got some. We got enough to start sweet potatoes next year. And I'll tell you that they'll grow voluntarily down in that bed for years to come. Took time to plug in some fall crops like lettuce, some parsley there, and grow in pots. Well, everything was looking great. This granate cabbage was so beautiful. That one I just touched actually survived the freeze, and that little core center section is doing fine. It's not as pretty anymore. But man, I really, really love the fall garden and the look of cabbages and the colors and it's my favorite. This pak choi was doing great. My turnips were doing great. The leeks were starting to beef up, but we had an epic freeze. And that happens. And so here's one last look around the healthy garden, a little bit before the freeze. Yep, the freeze came and decimated all this work. But that's okay, that's gardening, and that's our year. Well, as you just saw, generally in Zone 9A, we can garden year-round. And there's always challenges, but, gardening, sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad things happen. But the whole year, wow, it was a good year. We had some pestilence this year. We had this big freeze that just kind of knocked out everything here at the end. But overall, we had some good harvests and we cooked some good food. So there's the year in review. I hope that your garden is thriving, and I hope that you, if you like our content here on this channel, I hope you'll subscribe. And, happy gardening to you. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.